Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Freethinker Friday. My name is Nate Bander, and today we'll be taking a deep dive into the upper school, everything outside of academics. I am joined today by MPA senior Dhruv Muppidi, MPA sophomore Violette Cammack, and MPA director of guidance Randy Comfort. Thank you all to you three for being here and joining me today. We'll jump right into our questions. Dhruv, I'm going to start with you. As we talk about the upper school experience and discuss everything outside of academics, there's so much to talk about. There's athletics, there's extracurriculars, there's leadership opportunities, there's the social scene. Give us a little bit of an overview. What kind of sports, clubs, organizations are you involved with, and what is one that really brings you particular joy and meaning?
Yeah, so I love the community that comes with athletics. So I play with MPA year-round, soccer in the fall, basketball in the winter, volleyball in the spring. I dabble in forensics with speech and debate, but I'm certainly not as talented as some of my peers with that. One that gives me particular meaning is student council. I've always been heavily involved in school, and I'm always trying to make it, a better place that can better cater to the needs and desires of my classmates. So I've always loved representation, and for that reason, I've just always loved student council.
Yeah, absolutely. And you might not say it, but I will brag on your behalf. Dhruv is one of our co-presidents of the student council this year. So a great leader in our student community. Violet, moving on to you. Tell us a little bit more about in your sophomore year or in the last 2 years in the upper school, what sorts of clubs, organizations, athletics, all sorts of other things have you been involved with?
Well, a big one for me is I'm on the volleyball team, and that brings me a lot of joy because it's a fun way to kind of take a break from academics out of your day and have fun with your friends. And also, last year I was a part of Women's Empowerment Club, and that means a lot to me because I think that it's important to learn about feminism as a whole, but also as a woman, just educating yourself and being a part of that community.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you want to just talk briefly about when, for example, a club like Women's Empowerment Club, like Racial Justice and Equity Club, like Knitting Club, like Environmental Club, like all of our clubs, when are those meeting? When do you typically meet with your club?
They typically meet during lunch or recess, and sometimes both. So last year we met Tuesdays during lunch and recess, and you just get your lunch and then go to the club in a specific classroom.
Yeah. And for all of those watching, a little bit of information about that lunch and recess period. It is just ending right now. We have about a 50-minute lunch and recess period, so that students in the upper school are able to get their lunch and go to a club or talk to a teacher or have time to go outside in our courtyard and hit the volleyball around or kick the soccer ball around. So that's really nice, and that helps to develop that social feel for the upper school. There is a little bit of a break in the middle of the day where kids are able to enjoy each other. Mr. Comfort, Randy Comfort is our director of guidance. As we said, he is talking to us live from the mezzanine level, which is a group of study rooms up above our family commons where lunch is just ending. From your perspective as an administrator, how do these community building activities, whether they're clubs, sports, whatever it might be, add to that educational experience at MPA?
Yeah, thanks, Nate. I would definitely say, just to share, this is my 18th year at MPA, and I've worked in high schools for 30 years. So I've got both in California and here. So I've got a little experience on both sides of the equation. I can say what is unique about MPA and what is enriching about MPA. You've heard it described as the activities, athletics, clubs. What I love the most and what I think is the most enriching is that students don't have to pick between being an athlete or being in speech or being involved in a club and being in theater, or it's I'm this and that. You don't define yourself as being just an academician or just into student activities. You get to do it all. And that's by design. That's something I think is really amazing about the place. And I would also say that those experiences outside the classroom are at the heart of MPA's relationship-centric place. It's those relationships with your teammates, with your coaches, with your teachers that's so, so important. And what is fostered here, I would say in a very unique way. I've never seen a place like MPA that does it anywhere near to the degree this place does. It's really, really remarkable.
Yeah. Well, these two students who we have serve as great examples of that, involved in a lot of things, and certainly not pigeonholed into just being, as you said, just being on the basketball team or just having any other role. I think back to my experience as well, and my other role outside of working in admissions is as a coach, and I have students on my team who are involved in so many different things, on our JV basketball team. In fact, the other day, we delayed the start of our practice by a few minutes because a number of our kids were trying out for the spring musical. And I was thinking to myself, like, at what school are these kids who love basketball also, really passionate about being in a musical? And that's super cool. There is that opportunity to do everything. And as we talk about this, I want to invite the audience, anyone who is watching or tuning in, to submit your questions. Is there anything that you'd like to hear from Dhruv, from Violet, from Randy, as we get to know them a little bit more? Dhruv, I'd like to return to you. Tell me a little bit about what it feels like to be an MPA student. What does that community around you feel like as you're walking through the halls, as you're interacting with classmates? What kind of things do you feel?
Yeah, I'm actually going to add kind of a student's perspective to what you and Mr. Comfort were talking about, because I think it's really similar. I went to a school when I was living in Mexico for 9th and 10th grade. I went to a school which was much larger than MPA. And like most larger schools, when you do something, whether it's athletics, you're doing that 20 hours a week. You could pretty much only do one or two main things. But at MPA, you're not only allowed to pursue multiple passions, you're encouraged to do so. So like you were mentioning, some of my best friends, whether they're the sports captains, but they're also competing in math league. They're also madrigal singers. They're also performing in the musical. And I think MPA's approach to education is very holistic in that sense, where students become very well-rounded. And I think that reflects in the social scene as well, because we don't really have the same cliques that a normal, like the jocks or the theater kids, that a normal high school would, because everyone does or tries almost everything. So I think that's getting at what you were talking about right there. It's just, we don't really have the same cliques that everyone's talking about, because there's an opportunity for everyone to do everything.
Yeah. So it feels like as an MPA student, being a part of a number of different types of groups and a number of different communities within the school. Violet, moving on to another question for you. We talk a lot about rigor with purpose and how students balance these opportunities that are presented, whether it's athletics, clubs, leadership opportunities, with the academic work. Could you talk a little bit about how your teachers help you balance your time between schoolwork and extracurricular activities?
Yeah, I think teachers are always really open into meeting with a student, whether it's during recess or a study hall time or a free block. Teachers love meeting with students, and as a student, that's really helpful, because if you have questions on an assignment that you maybe didn't understand in class, it's good to get more insight on that particular assignment. Also, teachers will respond to emails any time of the night, and sometimes it's getting really late, but you have a question and the teacher will still respond. And that, especially after you finish a sports practice, it's really nice to be able to have teachers still being able to help you with your assignments.
Yeah, I love that little anecdote right there. I mean, at so many places, we hear from prospective families where, there's sort of the office hours and that's it. But what you're saying is you might have a volleyball game that's an hour away, and then be coming home and you got a question about science homework. And the fact that a teacher is available is such an important piece of building community and having a wonderful experience here. Randy, from your perspective, we talk a lot about the community here. What is it that you see in interpersonal relationships related to the social atmosphere? And no school is without its imperfections, we know. But are you seeing in the upper school those kind of systemic behavior or bullying or exclusion issues? My guess is no. But tell me about how we're kind of preventing those through our community here.
That's a great question, Nate. And it's also a topic that's kind of near and dear to my heart. It's something I really value about the MPA community. And one of the things I would say is that we have a deliberate practice in both curriculum as well as kind of social practice around inclusion, around making sure that there's not a power differential between being a senior and ruling the world and everybody gets in line behind that group. That's not the case. As Dhruv mentioned, it's not a clique driven environment. And you might have kids that cross over in classes together that are in very different grade levels and maybe very different interest sets, and they're still interacting with each other. So there isn't the power dynamics that lend themselves to one-upping somebody else. And I've described this environment many times as being a very high challenge, low threat environment. It's not based on competition. It's only how can I be myself, the best that I can be, and not necessarily how am I in comparison to somebody else, and therefore creating a differential there of power or some sort of a designation of who gets to do what. But the other piece is curricularly, we also talk about, we have a wellness class in 11th grade that we do talk about relationships and talk about personal boundary setting, but also the need to engage with others with concerns. Should you have a concern? When to tell a trusted adult? What's in the kid arena that things to process together? What's instead in the adult arena that needs support and some wisdom around? So a lot of the bullying things really stem, in my experience over time at other places, from those dynamics being so skewed in terms of who has and who does not have. Here, it's just not the case where, again, students are lining up against somebody else in that way or trying to somehow exclude or minimize or marginalize somebody else based on some factor that sometimes students have no control over whatsoever. So it's a remarkable place. Bullying is not an issue that we deal with on any sort of regular basis because, again, it's the kids that care about each other that are the difference maker. And one last thing I'll say as an administrator is that I'm a licensed K-12 principal for the state of Minnesota. And what I can tell you is that I know the name of every single high school student here. I know something about every student here in terms of what maybe they're involved in, what activities they're doing. Not every last detail needs to be known, but to be known is a huge part of being part of a community.
Yeah. And that was my experience too. And I've shared this story to many, but when I came back to MPA, graduated in 2009 and came back to work at MPA in the fall of 2015, I expected my former teachers, community members to remember me. That was an obvious, expectation because of how close MPA is. What really blew away my expectations was that they remembered my brother's name. They remembered my parents' names. They remembered even the name of my childhood dog growing up. They remembered Roscoe's name. And that was really when I knew that MPA was a pretty special place because, we've had about 1,700 total alumni ever in almost 40 years of the school. And so when you are known because your teachers, just from a sheer numbers game, haven't had to get to know hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids every year. It's, just a handful of new ones every year. You're able to develop really deep relationships with them. And so whether that's being, Facebook friends or them remembering your dog's name, it's a pretty special place. Dhruv, I want to go back to you and talk a little bit about your role in the student council. You're overseeing a lot of the upper school activities, the upper school's kind of social activities in a pretty challenging time right now. What are some activities that you still have been able to proceed with in this virtual way, and how have you adapted them this year?
Yeah, so when we first recognized certain traditions weren't going to be possible in the same way, we were pretty disappointed. For example, our annual lip sync, which you know all about. Mr. Vander is a 3-time champion, I believe. We couldn't do it in the Lansing Sports Center with the entire school watching. We had to move that completely virtual. But at the same time, we realized this was kind of a unique opportunity where we could create new traditions. So one example that comes to me is back in October for our homecoming week, we went to Target and we found this golden panther, which is actually kind of a bull, but we're going to call it a panther for the sake of this. And we hid it around the school, and we ended up having a really big scavenger hunt for it. And I think it was a great way. It was early in the year. It was a great way for new students and freshmen to really get involved with MPA. We were having people like search during recess, search during study halls. It was great. When we went fully virtual, I remember we did things like the crazy community cookie cooking cowabunga, where we all got together by like 40 or so people baking cookies during the holidays. And just a little sneak peek, next week we're going to be debuting the Snow Olympics. So there's a lot to look forward to, even though certain traditions haven't been fully in person with a whole crowd like we normally would have. It's certainly presented a really fun way and unique way where we can try new things. And I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah. Before I forget, I want to mention that Dhruv is in one of our quiet study rooms within the Upper School Commons. He's got some ceramics ceramics vessels behind him showing off student work. Dhruv, maybe you can turn your screen around and just sort of show us what you're looking at right now as folks are probably in their free periods right now.
Yeah, I guess you could call us the heart of the Upper School. You can see kind of the artwork, but then you have those are the commons right over there, and that's where a lot of students hang out during their free time. So yeah, was that a good view? Could you see everything?
Yep. Thank you so much. Violet, I'd like to switch gears to asking you a question. This is a pre-pandemic question, and this is one of the ones I'm most excited to ask. So you are part of our history-making MPA varsity volleyball team from last fall. This group of ladies was the first MPA volleyball team to qualify for the state tournament. They were the IMAC conference champions, section 4A champions. They won a school record 26 games. I believe at one point were ranked in the state. Talk about what it meant to be playing in front of 5 busloads of fellow students that were bussed down to the Xcel Energy Center, over 250 students in attendance. Talk about what that felt like to be there in that sort of school spirit type environment.
Yeah, it was definitely a memory that I'll hold forever, because on the bus ride down to state, the team all rode together and we brought a speaker and we were blasting music, and even our coaches were dancing on the bus, and it was really fun. And we got to the convention or the Xcel Energy Center, and as the students kept walking in, it was very exciting. With that came nerves, but once the game started, adrenaline just started pumping and all the nerves went away because everyone was there just cheering us on, and no one obviously wanted us to lose. So everyone was just cheering us on every point, and it was amazing.
It was. From a fan's perspective, your team played so hard, and it was a five set match, right? Am I saying that? So yeah, so really exciting to be able to play in the Xcel Energy Center, and that was a pretty fun moment for our school, and really brought our community together. And I'm so happy that happened last year, so we were able to be there.
Yeah.
So we'll hope to have a repeat of that in some form next year. Dhruv, you went to that, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, and you talked about bringing the community together. I remember that we even had some alumni show up from previous years who graduated in 2018, 2017. So it was just incredible. From a fan's perspective, obviously what they accomplished on the court was incredible, but just being in that stadium, it just felt, like we were in the Target Center or something like that, watching the Timberwolves play or something like that. It was indescribable, the atmosphere.
It was the big time for sure. We had a great time with that. Mr. Comfort, what do you remember about that day?
I stayed back at school, but there was middle schoolers and lower schoolers here, and we had the TV on directly behind me in the commons, in the family commons. We had a big TV screen projector up there, and we were cheering in the commons right behind me, as if we were there. So it was, while we weren't in the building, we were there in spirit, and there was a lot of kids in other grade levels that were also there, just super excited, cheering on the team. It was really amazing.
Yeah. Some great memories from that. I want to invite one more time, folks in the audience, if you have any questions, please write those in a comment or write those in the chat, and we'll be sure to answer that. Questions for me, questions for any of our 3 guests. We will continue here with a couple of other questions and shifting gears. Violet, let's go back to you. You've been at MPA since lower school. Talk a little bit about, in fourth grade, I believe you came. Talk a little bit about how the social opportunities, whether that's friends or the things that we've talked about before, clubs and sports and leadership opportunities, have increased as you've gotten older. You know, have become more numerous in middle school, and then in ninth grade, and then in 10th grade. From that, kind of how your social bubble has increased, both in a organic way as well as in a more official MPA way.
Yeah. In fourth grade, I remember my first pairing assembly, and I was paired with a sophomore. And at first, it was a little nerve-wracking because it was a high school student, but it was really fun. And then as I went into middle school, walking in the halls and seeing them, it was just a friendly face to say hi to. And then in 7th and 8th grade, there were peer leaders where you just got to know even more upper school students, so in peer leaders, 7th and 8th graders get paired up with 2 or 3 upper school students, and they teach them about different opportunities that you get in upper school or upper school as a whole, but also like different character traits that are good to have in like a friend or just a person in general. And volleyball also helped me a lot socially because I became really close friends. As a 7th grader, me and Kaya were the youngest people on the team. We became really good friends, and we've been warm-up partners ever since. And so that also, like, just every opportunity that MPA brings you, it just creates a friendly face in the hallways. Also in middle school, there are the middle school plays, and I was a part of that for all of middle school. And socially, you can get opportunities and find opportunities everywhere at MPA, and you will always have friendly faces in the hallway.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Dhruv, I want to put that question to you in a little bit of a different way. You and your family relocated. You were at MPA, and then you relocated to Mexico City, and then you came back and for the last 2 years here. And tell me about how you were able to reconnect with the folks that you knew in middle school, as well as add on some new friends who had come in your time away.
Yeah, so I think the main thing about that was when we came back to MPA, everyone had changed a lot. But at the same point, the things that had really brought us together hadn't gone away in middle school. So one thing I did in middle school that I didn't do in high school was Quiz Bowl. But even though I didn't have that Quiz Bowl link anymore, I was still able to connect with the same group of people because they had also kind of shifted to speech and debate. So that's how I got into forensics. So even though I lost kind of existing connections with these people, I was able to build it back in new ways. And to kind of add on to that, these activities really helped me meet new people because I remember our freshman year when I wasn't here, there were probably like 20 new students or 15 new students. It was a really big year for new freshmen. So when I came back in our junior year, I was like, who are these people? I don't know anyone that's here. And turns out a lot of them played sports, a lot of them played soccer, basketball. So it was a really good way for me to meet new people, to connect with new people that I just hadn't met before. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, that's actually a great segue into a question that I have for Mr. Comfort. There's a lot of prospective ninth grade parents and students watching today. Could you talk a little bit about how these new ninth graders are welcome to MPA in a very in our very systemic process in which they're integrated in the community? Of course, there's going to be that organic, you're out for soccer in the fall and you're just meeting kids that way or through clubs and organizations. But how is MPA really intentionally integrating the new ninth graders into that class?
Yeah, good question. And I would say that there's a couple of things that right out of the gate that I think are really important is, yes, there is that organic version where a student plays on a team that starts practice before the school year begins. But I would also say that in ninth grade, every ninth grader takes a seminar class, and I'm actually the one who teaches that class. And in that ninth grade seminar, it's exposure to all sorts of programs and people and ideas and expectations and what's high school. I kind of try to take the mystery out of what's it like to be a high school student. And that's done in a little bit of a smaller group where, so if there's 60 kids in a grade, there may be 20 kids per class in the ninth grade seminar. So they, in a smaller way, get to know each other. And there are new students in each of those classes that get to meet each other on a smaller scale, not necessarily just the entire grade at one time. But one of the things we actually do is that the very first week of school, we have a remarkable tradition in that we tend to start school. We do start school typically before Labor Day weekend in September. And we do a ninth grade retreat, an off-campus together retreat as a group to the Minnesota State Fair, the world's largest classroom, if you think of it that way. And in doing that, we actually go in groups in this massive scavenger hunt, and several of the chaperones, myself included, go on that trip, and we meet up with students at different places. But it's kind of a transition away from middle school to high school to be able to go from going to an event like that and having a chaperone with you versus you go together as a group and you check in with your chaperones. It's a little bit of a kind of a symbolic independence that comes with that. And instead of, again, 60 kids at once getting to know each other, it's groups of maybe 8 to 10 traveling the fair together. And so we do it in small ways like that. We do it in curricular ways, like I said, with the retreat. And then there's also the engagement of our older students, the peer leaders, a very deliberate program to make sure to pair up an incoming new student with an existing student at MPA as a resource. And in those first days of school, one of the most pronounced mysteries for many kids starting a new school is, where am I going to sit at lunch? Who am I going to sit with? What if I don't know anybody there? The peer leaders make space available, and specifically for all new students to join in with all the peer leaders as well. So there's an instant social group built in to try to take some of the mystery out of, who am I going to sit with? Is anybody going to like me, or how's it going to be? That's already built in as part of the process of transitioning into the school. So it's engagement with older kids. It's a deliberate retreat we do very early on in the year. It's a class dedicated to learning about the school, learning about each other, and introducing each other to some degree in that class as well. So those are all parts that are, and again, introduction to clubs or introducing clubs is a great way to encourage students to meet students of like mind, not necessarily who's another ninth grader, but what if somebody's really engaged in social consciousness and they really want to be a part of that club. They may meet other students that are 10th, 11th, and 12th graders who share a love and passion and a common interest. So that's another way to integrate outside of formal activities too.
Yeah. Violet, I saw you nodding along during the story about the state fair. That was you last year. Do you want to share a few memories about what that was like, going on a field trip with 60 of your new friends to the state fair?
Yeah, I was in a group with like 6 or 7 other people, or I think it was 6 other people, and we would go out and my group finished the scavenger hunt, so that way we could just like walk around the state fair, and you would just see other groups from MPA, and it'd be really fun to like say hi, or like my group went into like the haunted house with another group, and it was just really fun. And it was a good way to get to know the new students, because sometimes it's like hard to make friends as a new student, and hard to reach out, and the state fair was a really good way to do that because you were with like 6 other people who just everyone wanted to have a good time. So
yeah. Well, I see that we have a question coming in, and we have about a minute and a half here. So Seema is saying MPA's college counseling is top notch. Thanks, Seema. Dhruv, as a senior, what advice would you have for 9th and 10th graders to prepare for the eventual college application process? So Dhruv, that's a big question. You have about under a minute to summarize that. I'll let you go.
Okay, we'll speed through this. There's so much I could say. The first thing I would say is definitely, yes, you mentioned it, use your resources. MPA's college counseling department is fantastic. We have, I think, 3 counselors for our grade of 70. But what I see a lot of people doing is they don't really, they might not, Miss Peterson might reach out to them. They might not really use her as much until really the spring of junior year. So I would really say build connections with your counselors immediately, starting in freshman and sophomore year. That'll help a lot. Second, really do what interests you. What I see a lot of things online about, you should do this to get into this college. You should do this to get into this college. But MPA really creates an atmosphere where no matter what you do, if you pursue your passions and you take it seriously, you're going to be successful. And I think, honestly, that's what colleges are looking for. They don't want to see this cookie cutter applicant that is a state champion in debate, and does this, but only for the sake of college applications. Because then when you're writing your essays, the passion isn't really going to be there for it. So what I would really say is just be true to yourself. Whatever you or your students or your child is interested in, really just focus on that, because that's when you're writing those essays, that's where your authenticity will shine through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nate, if I could mention one more thing about that, and to play off what Dhruv just said, is that college counseling, the staff come into ninth grade seminars as what I said, orientation to the school and the process. It's a 4-year process. It's not just a senior year event. And seminar time is dedicated in ninth grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade for the college counseling relationship to grow and develop. So what's nice about that is it really is exposure in ninth grade without the pressure of making a decision on where you're going to go, what you're going to study. You have plenty of time to do that, but the first key is learning about yourself. And that's what we really strive for in that whole seminar process, is learn yourself and then expand out to where do you want to go, what do you want to do.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you to you both for answering that. We are just after 12:30 now, so I'm going to wrap everything up. There are so many things that are in addition to be able to be discussing through this. One of them is dances. Dhruv, you're off the hook. But we, of course, have them. That's something that a lot of folks ask about, what those are like. Certainly a chance to reach out to anybody in the admission office to connect to any other questions that you have about the social environment in the upper school at MPA. But let me first thank my 3 guests, Dhruv, Violet, and Randy, for your time on this Friday afternoon. Thank you to our audience for tuning in, and we will see you on April 2nd for our next Freethinker Friday. Thanks, everybody.